I'm Chengyi from INSEAD. Welcome you all to the first teaching webinar of the SMS teaching community. Today, as you all know, we're going to tackle a very interesting and important topic around case studies. We try to think of a catchy title. We basically heard the rumors and heard the student sentiments around the case study, right? Is it relevant? Is it too long to read? And are students still engaged with this very classic and very powerful topics? So we want to hear from you, and we also hear from the panelists. What should we do about it? There any new method that we can think of? Before we get started, I would encourage you to, if you can take a very quick few-minute survey. There are 4 slides. We want to get a pulse from you, right? How do you feel about this problem? Is there an issue, or we made up this whole thing, right? And what are some of the things you are doing as we send out the invitation? Many folks are also telling us they have been doing a lot of interesting things. So we want to hear from you as well. As you are doing that, it'll be a great pleasure for me to introduce the panelists for today. I think with the SMS community, these names are going to be very familiar. So we're going to ask them to give a very quick intro about themselves, and then we'll start from there. So it's great to have my colleagues, Andrew, Felipe, and Michaël with us. We're just joking about it. We're in the same corridor, so we're basically using all the bandwidth of INSEAD. So we'll start from Andrew. Maybe a few words about yourself.
Well, welcome to this webinar. My name is Andrew Shipilov. I've been at INSEAD since 2005, PhD from the Rotman School of Management. And when I joined INSEAD, I really was stressed about how do I survive in this place, and teaching is important. So I grew the beard and lost some hair. Now, after 20 years, I shaved the beard and lost some hair. But the idea was always that in this kind of place, you really want to innovate, and you want to make sure participants and students are interested in what you have to deliver in the class. And I've written a few cases. I've experimented with a few teaching tools. I direct some programs on managing partnerships and strategic alliances, direct other programs on innovation, and I'm happy to speak to you about one of the pedagogical innovation that we have done here, which is called the LiveCase, and I'll tell you after a few moments about how it's used, where, and what kind of benefits we could give to the participants.
Very good. We'll see how do we build the blue oceans as you teach. Now we're going to Michaël.
Yes, thank you, Chengyi. I'm Michaël Bikard. I've been at INSEAD for 6 years now. I've been mostly teaching stuff around innovation and technology, and so it's very nice now to talk about innovation and technology, about teaching.
Excellent. Felipe.
Hi, I'm Felipe Monteiro, and I've been at INSEAD for the past 13 years, but I started my academic career writing cases when I was working for Harvard Business School in Latin America. So kind of case writing, case teaching has been part of what I do for a long time. And here I teach a global strategy course and also teach a lot of executives. So I will share a little bit about how I am teaching cases today.
Thank you all, and I should say Felipe was the president for the teaching IG for the last round, and then he was the person who also bring me to where I am right now. I've been at INSEAD for 11 years myself, affiliate professor. I spent most of my time teaching digital transformation, mostly in the executive space, and a little bit on the MBA as well. So today what we're going to run is we're going to run this through 2 major parts. One is we're going to spend a little bit of time framing the problem, right? Is this a problem? We're going to get to see your data in a moment. We have excitingly over 120 participants. We have 40 some participated in the survey. If you haven't got a chance to do so, we'll give you a couple more minutes. And we're going to look at your results and see how do you, right? How do we as a collective feel about this problem? And then we're going to give each panelist about 10 minutes to really introduce what they do with the traditional case. How do we enrich it? How do we enrich the student engagement? And we're also going to talk about some of the new methods that we have developed here at INSEAD. By no means these are the only innovations, and therefore please during their presentations ask your questions. I will be moderating the Q&A. After this first segment around the introduction from each of the panelists, we're going to open it up to really answer your questions and how do we make these new methods work and what are the pros and cons of the methodology. So with that, let's stay with a little bit of this Mentimeter and see what we hear from all of you. The first few questions, very interesting. I use the traditional case very frequently in my class. We kind of see two peaks here. So we see a lot of people using a lot of the case methodology, and then some of them are using less. So it'd be kind of interesting to see how kind of that split in a way. The second question is, I have significantly increased the amount of cases used in my class in the past 5 years. Sadly, this is going to the other direction, right? So a lot of people are actually using less, some moderately less, and some a lot less in the classes. So I get a somewhat a good feeling that we haven't made this issue up. This is a shared concern that we all have. What do we do about it? We also see in the last one, people are moderately satisfied with the traditional case, but you also see two peaks. Some people are very happy. Curious to hear from you. How do you make it really engaging? And then the other end basically said there are some things that are not very happy, right? Very good. So second slide. What we basically see is we ask you to talk a little bit about your student engagement. In the first question, we basically see a wide range, right? So people are still engaged in the case studies, but a lot have become less interested as well. So we see a widespread. Probably there's heterogeneity at what level, geography, classes, students as well. But a lot actually become less interested. And this is quite consistent with what I see here as well. Within the core, for example, where I teach, students have a lot of case studies, right? And therefore make them a lot less to engage with this very, very sort of meaningfully. And the second question is, most of my students are well prepared. This is really bad news. The average is around 2, and the majority is actually around not prepared. We have 14 out of the total basically saying our students are not engaging with the case study. And then the last one, I am considering alternatives. So we see, once again, huge number around this. Before I go to the next one, we'll be curious if you type in the Q&A or others, what are the reasons? But I do see a lot of these, right? That's why we propose this idea. Students are not engaged for a lot of reasons. Most of them are related to time. So one of which would be there are too many cases, because we discovered this is a great method across all disciplines in business schools. We're using case studies. In one of the curriculum reviews that I've done in the past, and we basically find the students saying, we have about 5 to 10 cases to read every day, which in a way is very, very difficult, right, in a busy schedule. And the second one is the traditional case tend to be very long and very heavy with a lot of rich materials. So that many times challenge the student to really engage very deeply with the material. So that creates a huge dilemma. On the one hand, the traditional cases are great because they're very rich. But on the other hand, the density makes it rather challenging, especially with some young generations like the 3-minute TikTok video instead of a 20-page case. How do you deal with that, right? And the last one is an interesting one around ChatGPT. So I also want to show you a little bit of an anecdote for those who haven't experienced this yourself. So before in preparing the webinar, I actually wanted to can you guys see the web page screen, or is it still stuck on the Menti? No, okay.
Still Menti.
Reshare. Thank you. Let me reshare this. So what I did is I basically went on the website. I've wrote a couple of cases myself. And then I went onto this very powerful tool, ChatGPT, without uploading any cases. I asked ChatGPT, can you see the ChatGPT screen now? Yes. I asked ChatGPT to summarize the case for me and then talk about the main companies, Switch Screen's competitive advantage as it's described in the case. What's their unique value proposition? As you can see, the answer is not bad. It also cites the resources and what has been described in the case. That becomes rather interesting. Without reading the case, I also asked it to summarize the case and also give me a brief description of the case study of the company from outside sources. And it did that with the citation, right? So a lot of these are actually becoming really interesting, how students using other methodologies to really engage what is a powerful tool that in a way actually reduce the powerness of the traditional case. So in that context, what I want to do is now switch to our panelists and basically say, how do we resolve some of these, right? How do we start to think either differently to get the student engagement back or thinking about new ways to do it? There are two other slides that in the poll I'll show you later after we finish the round of introduction. So what I want to do in the next 3 parts is go increasingly more innovative in a way, or departure from the classic case, right? So we're going to start with Felipe, who has done a lot, right? Really a lot of best-selling cases, and he's also doing a lot with the traditional case to get the engagement from the student. So Felipe, what should we do?
Thank you, Chengyi, and thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks to the SMS and the teaching community for kind of organizing this. So, Chengyi, as you described, our shared concern, which seemed to be confirmed by the Mentimeter, is that students no longer read cases or don't read it as well as we wish. And basically, we are kind of discussing today 3 different ways of what can we do differently, right? And Michaël talked about kind of having shorter cases and his kind of wonderful mini cases. And then we here at INSEAD and many other places, we have different types of cases, right? And Andrew talked about live cases and VR cases. And I'm happy later in the Q&A also talk about how I'm using this. But in the next 10 minutes, what I like to do is kind of basically share with the spirit of sharing what I've been doing here, learning from different colleagues as well, and maybe also hearing from you is what can we do to entice students to read our cases, right? The traditional cases that we have. And I'd like to offer kind of 5 different initiatives that kind of somehow this multi-pronged approach that I have been using. As you can see here, some of those start even before the course starts. And I'll go through each of them. So I think the first one is kind of even before the course starts. Then what can you do before you teach the case itself? And I typically do the session before I teach a specific case. And then what can we do in the class? As you briefly see here, a lot of those initiatives entail using videos and digital. And I think in the spirit of making this very concrete to everyone, I will show you some very short videos, but I'd also like to say that there are a lot of those cases, right, where you have videos for instructors. So I would like to, and later on I'll show you where you can find those. But basically the idea is kind of, I'm giving examples that if you're interested, and I appreciate that a number of you may already have your own videos, but if you're looking for different videos, right, you can access them. So here we go. Let's go one by one. So what I typically do before my course starts, and most of the cases I will discuss today from the Global Strategy elective here at INSEAD, what I do is I do a Qualtrics survey where I ask students about the level of familiarity with every case in the course. And I'm showing here one of the cases that I teach, for example, is about FC Barcelona and how they create an area to access startups in different parts of the world. And what I do before the class starts is I ask students to fill that Qualtrics survey. And here you see, right, the number of those who say they are they have familiarity or either substantial or some familiarity. Why this is important? Because these are the people that are going to give a warm call. I will reach out to them and say, Harold, I see that you have some familiarity with this topic, or Ethan, you have substantial familiarity with this topic. When I teach it, I'd love to hear. And right, and also feel free to send me by email why you are familiar with this. For example, in this case, a lot of those, they would be just fans of football, which might not be particularly helpful for the discussion, but some of those, they have worked, they have consulted, so on and so forth. So I think that gives a very concrete, it gives me a very concrete way of engaging with students on the case, and also sending a message to them that they will be invited to participate. So that's even before the course starts. The second initiative here relates to what do I do the session before, because I think the assumption that not always is true is that, if you just say, next class we're discussing case A, people read that case, and people don't, right? There, as you saying, so much competition for the time, etc., etc. So I try the class before to stimulate them on the case. And I do this in different ways. And let me show you here a couple of examples. So I teach a case on BT and how do they manage the Global Open Innovation Initiative. And what I do, so I think the class before I teach that case, I ask them, what do you think someone acting as a technology scout, what that person would do? Okay. And then I show this video, and I'll show you just 30 seconds of it.
So Mark, if you think about and you look at your typical day, how would you describe it?
Yes, so I mean, it's normally perceived as, my role is normally perceived as a sort of glamorous role, and most of my UK colleagues are convinced that I have a very easy life. The reality of it is slightly less glamorous. I tend to start my days around 6 a.m.
So I would stop here, and then I would tell them, wow, why those guys start at 6 a.m. and somehow try to keep them puzzled, right, as they read the case, to understand what exactly those people do, what exactly the process involved. And right now, I cut it exactly where I cut for you. Yeah, just those 30 seconds. Let me show you another example of that. So I teach a case about how Tag Heuer connected with Google and Intel to come up with the first luxury connected watch. And I do a similar thing. I will show you the video that I showed to them the class before.
So with the benefit of hindsight, would you have done anything differently when it comes to the connected watch?
What I would have done differently?
Yes.
And then I stop there. So again, they laugh, but I try to give them the idea, entice the interest to read, but also give them the idea that when we discuss the case, they would have much more in terms of materials about what really happened, what people really do, kind of listening directly from the protagonist. The ideal world, right, would have protagonists coming to class, every class, right? So sometimes we do this. But I think also, as you teach in many different places, and sometimes a number of us might be teaching online. By the way, all the things that I'm mentioning here also works for those of you teaching online. So I think having those videos, I think, helps a lot. The other thing which I do before the class is having a mini assignment. And I guess, a number of us have been doing this, right? Somehow to convey the message that they have to read, they have to prepare something. But then as Chengyi showed, with ChatGPT, this becomes, a 30-second task for them. They don't have to read the case. They don't even have to upload the case. It is there. So what I do is, so for example, for that case on Tag Heuer, I have that question. So what I do is I show this to them, right? The class before, I say, listen, this is what anyone can get very quickly from ChatGPT, right? And you can read from my prompting. I say, no, this is the case about. And then I have another one, say, no, how do you make sure it doesn't look like I wrote this, right? That ChatGPT wrote it, that it was by you. How can you question the ambiguity of the questions? Because I think all my questions for those assignments are very ambiguous, purposefully, right? Because I want to generate a debate. But I think that the simple message here is just to tell them that the conversation in class will not be about those things which are pretty straightforward that you can get from ChatGPT, but will be about their experience, how the things that they write in the case relate to their own professional experience, to the other classes they have in in the MBA, so on and so forth. So clearly what you see, right, would love to hear your experiences doing this as well, or how do you deal with this, is, I mean, the very good students, I think this helps us to separate the very good students from the ones who will still just submit something which is just like what ChatGPT created, but at least you start getting some much better answers because the good students, they realize this and then they start to make an effort to say, well, if he has the ChatGPT answer, what can I do differently? What can I show differently? How can I convey something which is really about my experience and how do I relate to that? So that's what I do before the case. So you see, I think somehow having those things in the class before, and it typically just takes me 5 minutes, the session before where I teach the case, to motivate them on this. And then in the day where I teach the case, what I also do, and so for example, I have a case on NL and again, global open innovation, and in this case, sustainability, right? I have a question similar to what kind of Chengyi was asking you, you give a question and then you give options. And for that matter, I'm using here Poll Everywhere, but I take advantage of that to cold call people. But I try to do so in a way that is that's less intimidating. So before I show the results, so here, for example, I see that 18 people answer it, and before I show the results, I typically go kind of to different people and say, no, listen, you don't know the answer, you don't know how your class thinks about it. What do you think about this? What do you think of your colleagues think about this? So somehow, by having the answers already there, but not showing, I think allows me to have this type of conversation. And typically they feel less intimidated by this type of cold calling because many times, they are so curious to see what's going to happen, what the colleagues have said. And finally, and again, this goes back to the idea of using videos. I try to convey the message that they're going to have in class debriefs with the protagonist. So somehow I will show, when we discuss the case, I will show some videos where you see the protagonist reflecting about what happened, which also may stimulate them to say, yes, if I really want to understand, and see what happened, I need to read it. So, and I will show a quick one here.
In that journey, you said, you joined 2015. Over the past 7 years, I'm sure, you must have faced a number of challenges. You have learned a lot. I mean, could you maybe share with us maybe 2 or 3 of the main learnings, the main challenges over the past few years?
And again, right, and as I'll show you later, I mean, all those videos are available if any of you wants to use them. But I think the notion here is, how do you make class time something special for them, right? That is more than the paper and ink case. And again, if I go back to the Tag Heuer case, I think the type of video that I would have in class is someone like this, right? That I go and say, okay, you think that they should launch the connected watch, but what really happened? What surprised them, right? And then I show something like this in class.
We noticed that young people did not buy it.
So let me just kind of wrap up. If you're interested, right, and for those of you who are using cases and might be looking for cases that have this type of video materials, if you scan that QR code, it should take you to a page at the INSEAD Publishing where you have all those cases that have additional material. And there are much more, right? I just select the ones that I know. And that should take you to a page like this. That will, right, you see the cases and you see the materials which are for the instructors. Let me stop here, and I look forward to the conversations we're gonna have during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Felipe. This is great, right? So we learned there are a lot of things you could do before and after to entice the students, and then also sort of start to get speakers to get the classroom to be richer. I want to share a little bit as sort of a transition about the Mentimeter results. We also asked you, right? We said, what are some of the weaknesses of the traditional cases? Many of you said the same thing, is the pace of the change is fast, the case tend to be too long, students can find it outdated because the production process is also long. And then because it's long, then the student do not really have the time to prepare, right? So with that as a spirit, as I said, we're going gradually away from the traditional case. What I want to do is give the floor to Michaël. He's going to solve the problem of long cases, long production time, and then how do we bring in also speakers to actually speak in the classroom as well. Michaël, take it away.
Thank you, Chengyi. Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yep, very good.
All right. It is wonderful. Thank you very much again for organizing this and for having me here. I was reflecting over the weekend over this assignment that I got from Chengyi about thinking about case teaching, and I was thinking how ironic it was that I would be asked to talk about case teaching, considering that looking back at my first, at least the first 2 times I taught with cases back in 2013, it was a complete disaster. So I'm glad this is a private setting. I can speak openly. So back in 2013, I'm an assistant professor at LBS, and I'm teaching 90 students for the co-entrepreneurship course, and I'm really stressed, and I tried very hard to do the best to do a good job at teaching cases. Now, I go see some of my amazing colleagues teach. I go sit in Julian Birkenshaw's class or Gary Dushnitsky. I go see, I pick some of the freshest, most exciting cases, like the Rent the Runway case from HBS or the Cirque du Soleil case from INSEAD, and off I go in front of 90 students, and it's a disaster. Now, what went wrong? I think a lot of things went wrong, but certainly one of the things that's relevant to this session is that I really struggle with the fact that the vast majority of the people had not read the case, and so I was stuck between teaching to, the minority who had read the case, or teaching to the majority who had not read the case. And so unavoidably, I would end up somewhere in the middle. And that's not great because I end up making everybody unhappy, right? So the people who read the case felt like they're wasting their time. The people who have not read the case are lost. And I'm having a horrible time teaching. So clearly that case method of the technology was not working great for me. So I had to think about either any way to do better than this. Actually, I had to find a better way to do like this because frankly, in a school like LBS, just like INSEAD, it's not a place where you can be a bad teacher. So is there something broken with the case method? I spent time thinking about it and doing a bit of research. And my conclusion from this weekend's research was that, no, I don't think there is something deeply broken. At least if you look at sales, case industry as an industry is doing well, right? It's a growing industry, so peak cases have not been reached yet. Market like Europe and Asia seem to be still growing at least. So this is not a technology that's not working. It's working fine. It is great. No, it's not great either. I think we all, and I think Chengyi's Mentimeters were very nice in terms of showing that we've all experienced a version of that pain. It's great in many ways. It's great because it allows for a lot of discussion within the class. So you bring an actual real case inside the classroom and you get people to engage in it. It's much more fun than having a one-way kind of lecture. But, it doesn't work that great, right? So I found this article about the Harvard cases and thinking about, like, a lot of people like to criticize it, but one of the nice things in that article, just like, at the end you have like Jan Rifkin that says, sure, everybody likes to criticize it, but if you criticize it, you should find something better to do, right? Maybe that's just the best we have, and sure, it's not great, but it's the best we have, and so we should be happy with it. But as I mentioned, it was not really working for me, right? So it doesn't really matter that it was working for Gary Dushnitsky or for the Julian Birkenshaw. At some level, I needed to work for me. And so I went around my colleagues at LBS, and I remember sitting down with my colleague Anita in OB, and I asked her for advice. And she also shared that, and she shared something that someone told her. So I don't know the actual source of this, but this is what she told me, which was, if people don't like you teaching, just get someone else to do the teaching, right? Which I thought was kind of like, oh, that's an interesting idea for technology, like the guest speaker as a technology, right? And so, this is insane. We have to talk in terms of value curve, right? So I had to, if you look at it in terms of value curve, which you should, because it's a good way to look at anything, then cases are genuinely, I think, better in many ways. It was a true innovation, right? The invention of the case was a big deal, and that's why we all use cases. It really, really works well. It's much easier to read than a book. It's much more fun for the students. It's much more memorable. It's very scalable. It is expensive, right? Like we all pay a lot of money to the case publishers. I believe that Harvard makes around $300 million per year. Harvard in just licensing their cases, so it's expensive. But there is a lot of value being created here, provided I can make it work. So based on what Anita was telling me, okay, maybe there is another technology, and the other technology, namely guest speakers. Now, guest speakers as a technology are very low cost for the students, right? There is no pre-reading, which is really nice for students. You just show up, and here is the protagonist in class. It's much more fun, I think, for them. Very memorable. It is completely unscalable from our standpoint, right? So it is potentially very high cost, right? You need to pay for them to show up, come in person. You need to attract them. You need to find them. But then you get a lot of other good things for it, right? You get role models. The students get to expand the network. So I felt like there was maybe a sweet spot here between cases and speakers. And if there is any way to bring the two together, then I think we could provide really good experience for our students. Right? So that's kind of was the start of me kind of figuring out what works for me in terms of teaching technology. And that ended up with this really not rocket science solution, which was to say, if I only have the guest speakers, my biggest problem is that it remains very shallow, the discussions. People don't know the person, they don't know the background, etc. A lot of time is spent at that level. If I only have the case, then it gets really boring, and I always have this problem that people are not motivated to read it, etc. And so I found that it works very well to have a mini case so that they read it and they are motivated to read it because they know the protagonist will be with us, and then have the speaker in the room to kind of fill the gaps, right? It's a mini case. Maybe you want more information about this and that. While the speaker is there, you can just ask them, right? Now, I found that this works very well. And in a time post-COVID where everybody uses Zoom, having a person come on Zoom is actually not that high cost, right? It's actually pretty scalable. So let me just give you, and by the way, if the speaker is busy, you can always use videos, right? So just one example, going back to the value curve, right? The speaker cases, right? The speak case. The idea is that you have something that ends up being more expensive than a case, but hopefully will add a lot more value. So as a product, a mini case plus speaker, I found that yes, it's a bit more expensive than a case, but it really is worth it to me, because I think the value being added to the students is real. That's what I found. So let me give you an example. This is one of a very successful example of cases like this, one of my best ones. So Far Sound is a company that does live concert, live music gigs. And they started in London and then grew, and they're everywhere in the world. And Airbnb started seeing their success and decided to create a copycat, and they called it Airbnb Concerts. And so now you have an interesting situation with a scale-up, so far sounds, and Airbnb, this big tech giant that wants to basically copy them and may potentially kill them. Now, over time, I got to know both the CEO of So Far Sound and the founder, and the former head of Airbnb Concert. And I get both in the room, and I divide the class in two, and one class strategized for So Far Sound, the other strategized for Airbnb Concert, and then we hear from the speakers what actually ended up doing. You know, every time I teach this case with the speakers, the feedback I get is incredible. You know, stuff like, this was probably one of the best classes I've had in my life. This is not uncommon feedback I'm getting for this. Of course, I just pick one that I know works very well, but I think it gives you an idea of what can be achieved with these combinations of mini case plus guest speakers. I have written over 30 of those mini cases that goes with guest speakers. I've been actually sharing them with colleagues, and I found it works well in EDP as well as with the MBA students, with the MIMS. I teach them at every level. At least for me, it works great. Some of the feedback I got, I was just looking at like some of the feedback I got from the January class. And you know, some people are actually writing down, you know, making people read 20, 30 pages cases is kind of outdated. There is this feeling that people are tired of these long cases. But if you can actually bring the case to life through a mini case plus a speaker in the room, there is a way to have a very rich learning experience and to hopefully learn a lot more and in a more fun way that way. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaël. This is a great sort of opportunity also to highlight a lot of what we're trying to do as academics is not only the rigor in the research side, but also bring the relevance, right? So this connection with the speakers to actually talk about theory through examples, through their own experience, really bring that to life. I want to also bring in a reminder that please feel free to post your questions to the Q&A. We got a few, and also comments in the chat as well. We actually have many people sharing their own examples, like Magnus is saying, we can ask people, right, to use case as a content for graded debates. And then Paulo is also saying, if you, in the assignment, ask people to have a discussion and share the answer, that gives some peer pressure and can create a dialogue that really drive people, very similar to Felipe's approach, to read the cases. But we also have some more provocative question from Anthony as well, to say, all these are great, right? These are trying to pull the student in and entice them to read the cases. But as Michaël is saying, maybe, right, the underlying real issue is how do you have them engage with the material? So we really get the richness out of the longer case, because they are the nuances, they are the real experience, they are this sort of in the moment, how do you solve this challenge that leaders all have to face? He was actually recommending a kind of a tech-based way to think about it. So that's a good segue to introduce Andrew, who actually is one of the folks here at INSEAD, pioneered this creation of live cases, right? How do you take some of the cases, but use tech to give it a new life? So Andrew, take it away.
Yeah, so thanks everyone. And the origin of the live case idea was to understand how do we allow participants not even read the case, and how do we allow people to engage where they are really, really bored by reading, 20, 30-page documents, or even a 10-page document. And how do we create this dynamism and fun in the classroom where teacher doesn't always have to entertain them? Maybe we could use the technology to entertain participants as they are engaging with the material. So what is a live case? So live case is this case study that it's a format where the case is written not in a way of a text, but rather it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue where the participants engage with characters, where the characters are telling them the story. And in my case, for example, I've written a live case in a situation, in a scenario where this company in Sweden has to decide as to whether or not they would go into the platform business. And if so, what should be the different platform alternatives they consider, and how do they think about those, issues of competitive advantage, VRIO resources in the platform world. So at the end of the day, the case was really written to drive point homes that, when you think about examples like metaverse or any other sort of sexy topic of a digital platform du jour, you need to go to the basics and you need to go to understand, so what the platform is. Platforms is this business model that removes frictions from the market. We need to understand how platform works by thinking through network effects, is close to the form core competencies, leverage existing data. You can talk about VRIO, and maybe you need to think about the issues of curation versus free access to the platform. But the way they learn is they literally, I send them to the breakout rooms. In the beginning of the session, I give them a very brief introduction as to what is a digital platform and what are the basis of competitive advantage in the platform world. Send them to the breakout rooms. In front of them, there is a computer, and then there's a storyline they have to go through. They get introduced to the problem. You are, senior vice president or a consultant, depending on the case, and you're brought into this company and you have to solve the problem. And as people go through the story, they get exposed to different people. They get exposed to maybe a video or two, which kind of, shows the game that this company has developed. And there is a chat in which they sort of have different options to respond to the questions. More recent versions of LiveCase have AI-powered chats, where it's not just sort of you are reacting to some kind of a canned answer about the context or an option, but you write and you basically talk to a chatbot. And so as a result, people can come with zero preparation to the class, but after 1 hour of engaging with this case, they read the case together and discuss it in the groups. Now, I haven't used this format in an MBA setting. I mean, probably if you use that, you would probably need a double session where you've got 3 hours, and you can literally let them spend an hour as a group, read and discuss the case. Or I mean, read and discuss essentially means engage with the platform, debate and answer. At the end, in this Viv8 case study, they have to basically choose between two options. The setting is the game developer, and the game developer either needs to create this marketplace that allows participants to invent different digital objects they could sell and trade. So this would be one option, where you essentially creating this two-sided marketplace where some participants become content creators, or you go to a different version where we call this digital realm estate, where as a game company, you basically make people buy and place in the metaverse, and then you create a platform. You're connecting banks or lending organizations to people who would buy the land in the metaverse. Or you do nothing. Maybe there's an option basically saying we just will go into develop games without any social interaction, and that thing would work very well. So what I've noticed is that it's a very interesting way for people to engage with the material, because they get to read text in small quantities. And I don't know, maybe it's Instagram and social media which made all of us, professors included, to have much shorter attention span. But when you've got those blurbs of text that people need to read together and discuss and give answers to them, apparently those short blurbs of text attract people's attention much more than the giant paragraphs of text that people need to read. And also, being confined in the small room with your classmates in the group where you have to debate these things, the learning becomes collective as opposed to individual. And when the people go through the material, which by the way includes not just the case, itself about the Viv 8, but also the lecture stuff around what is a network effect and what is a platform, what is a multi-sided marketplace, what are the trade-offs of going into one to the curated versus non-curated platform. So we've literally baked those pedagogical things which I would have taught in the classroom. We baked them into the content that people are consuming. And when they are going back to the classroom, I could, just like Michaël said, you see which option people have chosen. One team wanted to go and create this virtual real estate. Other ones wants to do the central marketplace. So you get to debate, and you know what they've chosen because you've got this this dashboard which says team one chose that, team two chose that, and you get them to say, okay, why did you choose that? What were your considerations? You get them a little bit of fight to sort of make them defend their idea. And then you say, well, let's sort of say, listen, you watch the Matrix movie, and in the Matrix, there's this designer, and the designer sort of had this architect, had the ideas about the world. So when I created this world, these were my ideas about what would be some of the trade-offs between these options. And let me tell you where I tricked you. Let me tell you what were some of the curveballs I put in this case, because of course world is unfair and complicated, and this is why you made a mistake and you sort of went into that option, which was really a bullshit option, but I tricked you to do that because consultants could trick you when you show you these growth charts that they base them on totally unrealistic, unreliable data. So when you're faced with these complex problems, you really need to go back to this kind of basics and try to think about those, again, complicated choices through simple frameworks. So literally, I use this in the executive education format where I would set this up in 15 minutes. Then about 1 hour, people go through the case, 1 hour, maybe 70 minutes. They have to commit to an option. They come back, 45 minutes of debriefing, and that pretty much fits more or less about 3-hour session format, which if you teach 1.5 hour MBA classes, you could make a double session. And you could say, well, aren't the students upset that the professor is sitting there and doing nothing for an hour, literally when they are engaging with the material? The answer is, in my experience, they have not been upset because they're busy. They're busy, they're entertained, they're learning the material. Now, structuring the whole course about these live cases is not a good idea because they would probably feel that this is too repetitive. But to put one case like that, especially towards the end of the program, at the end of the course, where people are a little tired of reading the cases, has worked really well for me. So we do distribute these live cases through Harvard Publishing. So I did not have the QR code, but either if you go to LiveCase simulation, type it on Google, Viv 8 multi-sided platform, you would see that. There is a link. And the other thing which I've discovered is this this kind of format is very adaptable. So I'm taking this course to this part of this case, well, this course to the Middle East, and I wanted to localize this a bit. So you can change the characters. You can, magically teleport this from Sweden to Abu Dhabi. You could, add some elements, maybe some dialogue or something there, which would feel a little bit more like it's, it's set in the Middle East or a different location. You can change the assignment a bit. The version that I told you now, it's more like a consulting version. You have to consult the management team. But with some very light modifications, you could sort of make this more of a boardroom experience discussion. So very flexible, very interesting format. So I hope you guys and ladies take this and enjoy this. And it was, for me, it was fun, fun thing to develop and fun thing to teach in the classroom.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We already got some quite buzz in the chat. I think Magnus said the live case is so real. It feels like a simulation. And then, yeah, I am also convinced. So I'm developing my own sort of live case as well. And then Amanda, you're right? She's saying I've used AI prompts to create my small cases. and to have student complete in a group. I think this is a really great way to also guide the process, right? What it does beyond the simulation, it also can have injections of content, as Andrew was saying. So the student literally have injection of the frameworks, the tools, and so on and so forth. Now, I want to thank all panelists. We can open it up now for some of the discussions, and I'll moderate a little bit. I'll start with Felipe. There's actually a question from I think from a few, basically saying this is actually, shouldn't it be a mix of method, right? Vicky basically said it's just one of it, and now we have all these different methodologies, right? Live case, mini case, and traditional case, video case, multimedia case, simulations. Isn't just a mix of it. Can you share a little bit on how do you leverage all of these sort of in your class, and what do you find?
Thank you, Chengyi. And I do agree with that. I think Vic was making this point about, how do we have shorter cases, longer cases, VR and live cases. So just building on what Andrew was talking about live cases. So I use live cases exactly in the opposite way that Andrew does. So he said that he uses at the end. I use at the very beginning. So even before the course starts, I teach about how industries get global, and I have a live case on the globalization of the wine industry. So I ask students to kind of do the live case before the course starts. And when the first day is, a lot of things that you saw in the live cases that are very real situations, we're gonna now think about how do we think more systematically about it. And I think, Jenny, maybe we will go back to this point later on. And I think I know Andrew and Michaël have experience on this too. I think the other kind of new type of cases that we haven't talked yet, right? But we've been doing quite a number of new initiatives on this is because are the VR cases, right?
VR,
so virtual reality cases. And maybe let me just share one experience with the group here about VR, which I think is really what has been kind of at least very effective with executives, is this idea of how by having immediate feedback, right? So we have cases, right, that you can have eyeball tracking. So you see what participants, right, what they pay attention to, and then using that feedback immediately in the classroom. So they say, yes, these are things you're all looking at this place, so this person might be missing here and there. And Andrew, I do this the same way that you do the live case. I do at the end of the program, right? So they have learned a lot of things. And then the VR case is a way to, really practice it. So, but I think, Jenny, to your point, and I think Andrew said this before too, I mean, you cannot have a full course on VR, right? Or you cannot have a full course on live case. So I think it's exactly right, that mix, right? And people learn differently, right? Some people prefer, right? And then I saw Alison asking about having the paper, no screens. Some people prefer to have the cases printed. Some people have shorts. So I think, as courses, right, and programs, I think probably a mix of those. It is where most of us are going.
A few questions related I want to bring up before going to Michaël on a bit more on mini cases. So I definitely agree with Vicky, right? So there's also the cost component, right? If we keep bringing a lot of these sort of high value courses, that could be kind of difficult as well. There are other comments around have people use like paper based case, right? Distributing that in class. And then there's also the argument, the long case bring a lot of analytical skills. So how do we think about the balance of it? Because some courses may require no electronics in the classroom. So any of you want to chime in and think about how do you find that balance between the new technology, which could be expensive, versus the classic ones, and maybe we're going back to the paper age?
But I would think the mix is important. So when I have a program on managing partnerships and strategic alliances, which I co-teach with a colleague of mine for 5 days. And basically, it's a dog and pony show of 5 days of 8 hours. And even though, him and I are entertaining and we do bring guest speakers, but you need some variety, because you cannot just literally have, okay, Monday read the case and discuss, Tuesday read the case and discuss. And that's twice, one case on Monday morning, another case Monday afternoon. I mean, it's just horribly complicated. And but if you do sprinkle some of those different activities in there, that's what people appreciate. They appreciate the mix. And if you are teaching the material, like I know some of our colleagues teach K-Core programs on M&As, and it's like 5 days on M&A. And clearly you do need, the evaluation, you need the quantitative stuff. So for that, you would use the classical case. and that's fine. But then if you have the behavioral aspect of an M&A, such as, the boardroom dynamics, for that we actually have a VR case where you could plug that in. I also noticed there was a question about using live cases in the chat and as in the online classes, and you can do that too, because literally, if you teach an online class, you could let people complete that live case on their own as a prerequisite for the online class. And that would also allow for some flipped learning where, live case, or even just as simple as recording videos of your lectures before the class for the online session, that specifically allows people time for Q&A, where you don't have to explain the basic things. They get to understand the basic things. And then in the online session where everybody has a very short attention span, that gives you more time for Q&A and discussions. And my experience would actually have a very much richer program than in a single format.
I agree. I mean, from my experience, I still enforce 1 or 2 long cases for the core, right? And so that gives you the students very sort of deep ones, and then you can use the different methodology to have them encourage them to read before. And just for the question around paper, some of the executives, it's actually better if you distribute paper and ask them to read in class, right? And then because they might be very busy sort of before coming into this. Very good. Now let's go to Michaël a little bit around mini case. There are quite a few questions around that. Basically, can you speak a little bit more about this sort of a speak case model? Does that help or hurt sort of when the students have different understandings of it? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I do not use other ways of teaching, at least not before. I only use mini case with speakers. Every speaker is different, and I use them in different ways. Sometimes I do role models with the speakers briefing on who was there in the room, and different group of students are given different roles, and then we reproduce what happened with the speaker in the room. But I teach 2 full electives. Both of them are very popular, and I only teach with this method. So I think there is also value in specialization.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm more than happy if anyone is interested in this to have a conversation to explain some of the tricks that I've learned over the years, because I've been doing that for a long time. If anyone is interested, I've done. So there was a question about which audiences. So the beauty of mini cases is that it happens sometimes that I realized that, recently it happened in a program with a Greek bank, that we realized that somehow none of the participants had read the case. And that was not their fault. It was the person who was supposed to send it to them did not. Now with a regular case, I would have lost my mind. We're talking about a 1-page case. Just give them 1 minute, give them 5 minutes to read it, and that's the end of the story, right? So there's something beautiful about having this option of if no one has read it, then let's just take 5 minutes to read it, and now we can start and be at the same, or everybody's on the same page. But I have used those cases for every program, honestly, from a master's in management that we have here all the way to executive levels. And I found that.
I guess if I may, Michaël, I think the opportunity for scaling. Are you saying that your guest speakers could also go teach in other programs, or are you saying that everybody would basically have to develop their own mini cases for?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for realizing. No, my idea, and I've already talked about it with some of my speakers, not all of them, is that of course for it to be scalable, you need to pay them. But we pay speakers, we pay cases, right? When we license a case, we pay for it. Well, those people's time is precious. We need to pay them for their time. But yeah, they would many of my speakers, I know would be willing to do that if they could be paid. So the idea that if you want to license a mini case from INSEAD, you'll pay something for the mini case. If you want to license the mini case and the speakers that go with it, then you'll assuming that the speaker that go with it is available that day, then you just pay extra for the speaker because we need to pay that person. Sure, yeah. So far I have written 30 of my 30 mini cases that go with speakers. I cannot guarantee that all of them will be up for it, but it's a conversation to start.
I think
Just on
Jenny,
that one, I think nowadays it's actually made it a little bit easier with the online. So I've invited folks who used to be sort of very busy. It's very hard to commit a day to specifically go on campus. But with online, you can actually quite easily bring them in for an hour or two for these kind of conversations. Let's continue on that a little bit. I want a question from Tamás. I think it was kind of Felipe addressed a little bit, but I do want to bring it back. Like, how do you bring high-level speakers? Actually, one of the beauty of MiniCase, what I find is you can bring not just like big CEOs from big multinationals, right? A lot of the cases are actually about the smaller ones. So maybe Felipe and Michaël can share a little bit. How do you engage with the speakers so they're willing to commit their time, right?
so I think for me, Jenny, I mean, it's always a bottleneck, right? Because people, if you are inviting them again and again, and I think the beauty of what Michaël does, he has so many speakers, right? That he can go, depending on different courses, he can kind of somehow have a rotation of the speakers. But I think one thing which I think is super interesting, at least it changed my approach. I think I have always invited speakers and recorded them. So I record in the classroom, record them in the TV studio. So I have those videos, right, that I can use many different places, and these are the videos which are available for people in other schools who want to use it as well. I think what has changed, I think the technology got better now, is to do kind of professional video interviews remotely, right? More than a Zoom thing, and without without requiring a lot of technology. But I think the final product is much better. So what I'm also doing more now is also recording videos with speakers that I don't require them to come here. So it is intermediary between them coming here and have a professional thing in the studio, having a Zoom call, which is nice, but sometimes not as nice, and have this intermediary product, which is I record something better than Zoom, but still remotely, which reduce. And I think I'm getting more and more inclined to see the improvement in the quality of doing this.
Michaël, anything on speaker?
Yeah. This is a great question. It's really hard to find good speakers. It's very hard. It is just really hard. I have written a lot of cases that I'm basically not using anymore because the person is either not that good or just too busy, or just like was happy to do it like 3 times but doesn't want to do it anymore, etc. So my solution is that you just need to find the right people, but you need to pay them. Right? If you ask for favors, you cannot. This is completely not scalable. You want them to do a good job. They are very busy people. They need to be paid for their work. So how much, I don't know. Potentially different people will be paid different things. But recently I had a former CEO of a bank come to my class, and I paid her €1,000 for an hour in my class on Zoom.
So a lot of these compensations may not really be sort of a true compensation, but at least it's the token of appreciation, right? So Jamal, to answer your question, yes, you can talk to Michaël about the package, but this is also on the side note, right? There's something that the SMS committee is also thinking about. How do we, as a committee, as a community, engage with the practitioners, right? Either through the conferences or through others. I think some of these offshoot conferences may be helpful to build these connections. I also want to switch a little bit onto this question by Zachary. I think it's a nice one. So a lot of the big best-selling course cases focus on multinationals, right? I mean, these very famous big brand names that students can resonate with. We all know, we like their stories. But there's also beauty about the small SMEs, and how do you actually think about engaging with them? And the students also think about entrepreneurship. So I know, Michaël, a lot of your mini cases talk about those. So I'll start with you. How do we actually think about engaging with them more? And then I'll probably go to Andrew, because a lot of the live cases also tackle with this size, right? Not necessarily a big multinational. So Michaël.
Sorry, engaging with whom?
SMEs, like smaller companies, like scale-ups, and not just like big brand names.
I guess I find it easier, frankly, to engage with SMEs than to engage with large corporations. Personally, there is a lot less bureaucracy about getting them to sign the paper to just let us use the case whenever we want. So yeah, I like, if you look at Actually, I've wrote many cases that I have not even published, but if you are interested, just let me know. I'm happy to publish them. It is, at the end of the day, for me, like, I just try to reach out to people. Many of my cases are about INSEAD alumni, but a bunch of them are not. And then people like, a lot of people like to speak about themselves. I think the problem is not that. The problem is to find people who like to speak about themselves and have something interesting to say, and who are going to be available over and over again. Right? So you need to find people who actually like it and get something out of it. Sorry.
Thank you, Andrew. Anything
I would
around
say,
SME?
I would say the other alternative, just make them up. So my Viv8 doesn't exist. It's a small company in Sweden, but it could be a sort of a big small company in Abu Dhabi. The CEO, you can make up any avatar you want. You can write up a story you want, and that's the alternative. I mean, if you think about sort of really premium product of short case with a speaker from a real company. And Felipe sort of says, okay, we could sort of record them from a real company. I guess LiveCase is like, not a real company, not a real person, but a real problem. And in fact, the way to create those live cases is to be inspired by the older cases that sort of, that end their life cycle. Maybe there's some case which was like super popular 20 years ago, and it's like it's not popular anymore because it's age or it's in a different industry. I mean, if somebody could create a crown, cork, and seal version of the live case or the Cola Wars and like put them into a different setting, I mean, that would be easy. And that you could make it a small, medium-sized company, or sort of SpaceX doesn't. Well, SpaceX you cannot use, but you have to come up with another name. But it solves. I mean, none of these solutions is in of itself without problems. But collectively, as a teacher, you have this whole menu now between the things that you can do.
Yeah, and I think
Excellent.
just on your point about the live case being fictional, I think it's fantastic, right? Because they are fictional, but right, we have real people recording. I think you use metaverse. I mean, I have recorded with kind of artists or people kind of doing the videos. So for the students, it looks like they are real, but they are not real, but they are fictional, and in that sense, much more scalable.
Excellent. We're coming up to the end of the webinar. I want to take Aditini's question and then probably spin it slightly differently and then give it to every panelist. This is something that we like as academics. What are the boundary conditions of using your innovation, right? So what are some of the good conditions and not so good conditions to use, let's say, traditional case, live case, or mini case? And then maybe tag on a little bit of where do you think this is leading us to, right, in the future? Like, how are we going to get students both smart and deeply engaged with what you do? This time, I'm not going to cold call. I'll have volunteers. Who wants to go first?
So maybe, Jenny, let me just share one thing that
Please.
I think worries a number of us, right? Is what you described is with traditional cases that people can go and just upload the cases on AI. I mean, the bar, right? What we expect that people would read and what they could make kind of smart comments, that changed, right? So I think our ability, what can we do to make sure that the debates in class are generally debates that were fought, right? And insights that came from the students' reflection vis-a-vis just kind of going and bypassing this with, I think it's a big issue, okay? I think it's a big issue. I think it is, right? We try, and I present one way of trying to deal with that, but I think we need to think more about how to make cases still valid and still kind of push for the reflection of the students, knowing that it's so easy for them to get something pretty reasonable with AI. So I think that's I mean, there's a concern about many cases, about the traditional cases. I don't know, Jenny, just to know what is going, but I think that spirit of that we want to have a mix, right? And that on the one hand, we should be experimenting. My view on this is kind of, I love to experiment with those technologies. I think, right, we learn. But I am also not someone say, yes, I will abandon traditional cases, and now fully move to any of the others. So that's where I am.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, the boundary condition is overusing one single format. Because I think people, you can keep people attention if you offer them the variety of formats. And it doesn't matter. I mean, LiveCase, real case, VR case, speaker case. I think if I've taken our own program for 3 weeks at INSEAD, and I was amazed how people can actually sit for like 4 days in a row and be sort of have the attention. And for us as educators, I mean, we need to keep people's attention, and the technology helps people attention, but you need to have the mix, and that's the boundary condition. No, don't over rely on a single pedagogical tool.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Michaël?
Yeah, so great boundary conditions, really important. Two things. The first one is just the availability of speakers. As far as I'm concerned, that's the big bottleneck. All right, so I teach mostly in Europe and in Asia, and so that's where the time zone is a big constraint. So I actually have developed cases with speakers based in those time zones on purpose. Right, so I've been shying away from developing cases in the Americas because I don't teach very much there. So that's the first thing. The other thing I want to highlight is I think in innovation entrepreneurship, which are some of the things I teach, role models are super important. And I think especially bringing a female entrepreneurs for my female students, I can tell every time that it matters to them. And so I think that it lends itself very well to a topic like what I teach. And I'm not sure that it lends itself as well for people who teach, say, accounting. Right? Like if you really want to have anything that's completely about crunching numbers, etc., you could have some number crunching and do some of it. But like most of my cases don't have that dimension. That's not the point. We're talking about strategic decisions and situation where role models matter. And I think that's where those cases really shine.
Excellent. I think we're converging nicely around the theme of multi-method, including case, but also beyond. Just showing a few resources that I've already kind of typed in, many of them in the chat. One is around INSEAD publishing, and then also Case Center that has a lot of traditional cases with multimedia. We have LiveCases. Now there's started to be a library around this that you can pick from. They are similar but different from simulations, but because it can provide a lot of the pedagogical tools as well. There was a question in the chat, does that render in-person not relevant? The answer is no, because people actually love the in-person discussions and simulation role plays that many of you love too. There's the VR that can really be helpful if you want to immerse in certain situation or be imaginative. I use the Mission to Mars a lot myself as well. And then there's the Strategy GPT. Many of you talk about can actually help with different ways that you can engage with different content to actually have a deeper dialogue. I do want to end this webinar on what you have already done, right? This is a teaching community. A lot of us are already doing a combination of a lot of these things. So there are short cases, there are mini cases, there are spoke cases, there are simulations, articles, and then AI tools that we can engage. And many of you are building this together. So hopefully what we've done in this little webinar is give you a few ideas on how do we break the new grounds and try to innovate, either to enrich the case or to have new methodologies. And hopefully this gives a platform, right, for all of us to continue in the teaching community to share a lot more so we can enrich our teaching method a lot more, because the ultimate goal is for the student to get enriched through our educational system. So with that, let me thank all the panelists very much, Andrew, Felipe, and Michaël, for sharing your innovations, and thank you all very much for coming.
Thanks, Chengyi, for
Thank you,
organizing.
Chengyi.
Thanks, Chengyi.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.